Imagine sitting at a Thanksgiving dinner, surrounded by family, when your husband slides divorce papers across the table in front of everyone. That's where Ella's story begins. But what she does next will leave you speechless. The crystal wine glass slipped from my hand, shattering on the polished walnut table, just as an ochre envelope landed in front of me. A thin line of blood traced across my palm from the broken glass. But the sting was nothing compared to the icy weight in my chest. 24 pairs of eyes turned toward me, their curiosity laced with smug satisfaction. My name is Ella, and this Thanksgiving dinner at my in-laws' sprawling Connecticut estate was unlike any other. "What's this?" I asked, my voice steady despite the tremble in my hand as I reached for the envelope. "Divorce papers?" Brandon, my husband, said, his tone as cold as if he were noting we'd run out of mashed potatoes. Before I could respond, Mildred, my mother-in-law, took a slow sip of her Chardonnay and set her glass down with deliberate precision. "We thought it would be kinder to do this with family present," she said, each word sharp and regal, like a judge delivering a verdict. "Kinder for who?" The question caught in my throat as I locked eyes with Julie, Brandon's sister, who smirked behind her wine glass, clearly relishing the moment. "You filed for divorce at Thanksgiving?" I repeated, the words clawing their way out. "Sweetheart," Mildred continued, her gaze icy, "everyone here knows you were never quite right for this family." Under the table, Lindsay, my best friend, who'd insisted on coming tonight, squeezed my hand. She was the only reason I hadn't bolted the moment I arrived. I glanced at my plate, turkey, cranberry sauce, golden rolls, and felt my stomach churn. I'd never been so humiliated, and they weren't even pretending to care. "Oh, come on," Julie chimed in, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "That little art studio in the backyard? It's just an excuse to avoid a real job." Laughter rippled around the table, even from cousins I'd thought were neutral. I searched Brandon's face for a trace of the man who'd once helped me paint the studio walls, but he avoided my gaze, as if I were a stranger in the home we'd shared for 6 years. "We're just trying to help you wake up," Mildred said, dabbing her lips with a pristine napkin. "This family needs someone stronger." I took a deep breath. My hand brushed against my purse, where a document I'd kept secret for nearly a year lay hidden. The deed to this house, signed over to me by Brandon during a late-night argument on our 6th anniversary. He'd been too drunk to remember, but I'd filed it the next day. "You're right," I said, rising from my chair, blood dripping onto the tablecloth. "I don't fit in with this family. I'm far above your standards." Brandon's head snapped up, his face flushed. "What? Lindsay, can you drive me to the hospital?" I asked, turning to my stunned friend. "My hand's bleeding." "Oh, and Mildred, you might want to wash that tablecloth soon. Blood stains if you leave it, kind of like deed transfers." The clatter of silverware filled the room. "What deed transfer?" Mildred asked, her voice unsteady for the first time. I gave a small, cold smile. "Happy Thanksgiving. This might be your last meal in this house." Ignoring the shouts and toppled chairs, I walked out, Brandon's voice fading behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. What I needed was to stop the bleeding and start the plan. Lindsay drove through quiet suburban streets, the amber glow of streetlights casting soft shadows. My hand, wrapped in a blood-soaked napkin, throbbed, but the pain paled against the rupture inside me. Years of silence finally breaking free. At a small emergency clinic, a doctor stitched my palm, 6 stitches. I didn't flinch. In my mind, I was no longer the quiet wife of the Harringtons. I was Ella, the woman who stood up when everyone expected her to stay down. Back at Lindsay's city apartment, I opened my phone and pulled up a draft email to my attorney, Gloria McDaniel, a sharp lawyer who'd won impossible property disputes. Subject: property at 118 Willow Creek. The time has come. I hit send, Ella, are you sure? Lindsay asked as I poured a glass of water. I looked at her, the friend who'd never laughed at my dreams, who'd brought me coffee when I painted through the night. I've been silent too long, I said, my voice low but firm. Now it's their turn to listen. The next morning, Gloria arrived at Lindsay's with a thick folder in her no-nonsense gaze. What's first? I asked, setting my coffee down. File the ownership confirmation at the county office, she said, flipping to a notarized copy of the deed. Then serve the Harringtons with a 30-day eviction notice. I nodded, unblinking. The time had come. That evening, I returned to the estate, not as a daughter-in-law, but as its rightful owner. The grand house stood silent in the dusk, its glass doors reflecting my headlights. I didn't knock. I rang the bell, because I had every right to. Brandon answered, stunned to see me in a long coat, hair tied back, papers in hand. Ella, about yesterday. It's not about yesterday, I said, handing him the notice. It's about the past 6 years. He stepped aside. The living room still smelled of polished wood and expensive perfume, but it was just a facade now. Mildred, Julie, and a few relatives sat on my couch, in my house like they belonged. What's this? Mildred asked, eyeing the papers I placed on the glass coffee table. In order to vacate within 30 days, I replied, meeting her gaze. This house has been legally mine since last year. Brandon's face paled. Julie exhaled sharply. Mildred's composure cracked. You can't. I already have, I said. I don't plan to kick anyone out for spite, but if you thought you could push me out of my own life and keep living here, you might want to read that notice carefully. I left them in silence, a house full of people, suddenly unsure of their place. That night I didn't sleep. I opened my laptop and revisited a plan I drafted years ago as a dreamer, pinning sketches to my studio walls. I'd always wanted to turn that backyard space into an art gallery, not for elite exhibits, but for works rejected by galleries, dismissed by families, overlooked by the world. I had the vision. I had the name. The haven where art finds refuge. The next morning I stood before the estate's towering windows, once a symbol of Harrington wealth, now an empty canvas waiting to be reborn. Lindsay joined me, holding 2 steaming coffees. She paused in the grand foyer, where Mildred once made me scrub floors for first impressions. This place could be something else, Lindsay said, eyes bright. A real gallery, full of light and freedom. I nodded. Remember Professor Bennett, my college restoration teacher? The one with the deep voice and stories about lost Renaissance paintings? I've been working with him secretly for a year, nights, weekends, while Brandon thought I was at book club. Lindsay laughed. Time to bring that secret into the spotlight. I called Professor Bennett. It's time, I said when he answered. 3 days later, his Boston studio felt like another world. Exposed brick, the scent of linseed oil, sunlight streaming through tall windows. On a table lay a half-restored portrait, its subject's face emerging from centuries of grime. You're right on time, Bennett said, removing his goggles. I'm guessing the Harringtons are learning what consequences feel like. Not exactly, I said, placing my gallery designs on the table. I don't want revenge through anger. I want to rebuild through art. He studied the sketches. The grand hall as the main gallery, with a skylight for natural light. Side rooms for restoration studios, classrooms and exhibits for emerging artists. What's it called? He asked. The Haven, I said. A place where art is brought back to life. Bennett nodded, leading me to a room filled with damaged paintings. He pointed to a still life, its corner torn, smoke-stained. You want to create a space for things others call beyond repair. I like that. I was one of those things once. The following week, back at the estate, contractors began stripping outdated wallpaper and hauling out Mildred's French heritage armchairs. I stood amid the dust, blueprint in hand, directing each step like a conductor. On day 10, I sent a press release. A mansion once defined by tradition will become a sanctuary for rejected art. The response was swift. An art magazine requested an interview, a Chicago collector offered funding, and then, unbelievably, an email from the Smithsonian Conservation Center, which had rejected my internship 3 times, now wanted to collaborate on my open access restoration model. One afternoon, as golden light filled the empty great room, I unrolled a new floor plan. My eyes landed on the spot where the Harringtons' dining table once stood, where I'd been handed divorce papers. That space would now anchor the grand opening exhibit. The memory lingered, but it no longer held me captive. Lindsay walked in, holding a box of mail. "Handwritten letter," she said, handing me an envelope. Inside was a single line from Professor Bennett. "If these walls could speak, I hope they'd tell the story of someone who turned brokenness into light." I smiled, steady now. The gate buzzer rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. Marcus, the new security guard, radioed in. "Miss Ella, a Brandon Harrington at the gate, says it's urgent." I glanced at the clock. 9 a.m. Too early for casual, too late for sincere. "Let him in, but only to the outdoor guest area. He doesn't enter the house." 5 minutes later, I stepped onto the porch. Brandon stood there, hands in his overcoat pockets, eyes bloodshot, face drawn. "Thanks for seeing me," he said, his voice rough. "You have 5 minutes, I replied, arms crossed. He swallowed. "Julie's pregnant. We plan to move back here this spring. This house, it's been in our family for generations. Her child should be born here, to carry on the tradition." I let out a short laugh, not cruel but unyielding. "You want her child to grow up in a house where his mother mocked my first painting at dinner? Where your mother made me polish floors to prove I was worthy?" "Ella," he stepped forward, but I didn't budge. "No, Brandon, I don't need another explanation." I pulled a city-stamped floor plan from my coat. "This house is becoming a community arts center. It's funded, approved, and opens next month. All documents are in order." He flipped through the pages, then looked up, defeated. "My mother will never agree to this." "Your mother," I said firmly, "has no say here." That afternoon, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Mildred's voice cut through, sharp as ever. "I'm requesting a meeting. Immediately." "I'm not obligated to meet you, Mrs. Harrington." "You don't understand the consequences," she said, a hint of urgency breaking her usual command. "This family has influence. You won't be left in peace if you dismantle our legacy." I smiled faintly. "I'm not dismantling your legacy. I'm building a new one, more human, more open, and not rooted in scorn." Then I hung up. The next day, Mildred arrived at the gate in a black cashmere coat, gesturing at Marcus. From the security monitor, I watched her, the woman who once ruled this house, now stopped by a gate only I controlled. Marcus stood firm. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harrington. Miss Ella doesn't take unscheduled visitors. There's a secure drop box for documents." She glared into the camera, as if trying to burn through it. I stood before the monitor, unmoved. That evening, the Harringtons' lawyer emailed an offer to buy back the house at twice its market value. I replied, "I'm not interested in money, I'm interested in purpose." I leaned back, gazing at the wall where the grand opening centerpiece would hang, a sketch of shattered glass forming butterfly wings, a symbol of transformation. They could resist, they could offer millions, but they'd never reclaim what I'd taken back, my voice. On opening night, the haven glowed against the winter chill. Golden lights illuminated exposed brick walls, showcasing art rejected by galleries but cherished here. Guests filled the former Harrington foyer, reporters, collectors, curators, even faces who'd once rejected my work. Lindsay, in a deep emerald dress, approached. "There's a line around the block, and Channel 6 set up a camera." I nodded, heart pounding, not from fear, but from knowing I had nothing left to lose. At 8 p.m., a chime signaled the speeches. I stepped to a wooden podium under a spotlight. "Thank you for coming," I began, voice steady. This place was once filled with silence, expectations, and judgment. Tonight it's home to stories. Real, raw, unapologetic. I turned to a covered painting. This piece was born through sleepless nights, doubt, and moments I thought I wasn't enough. Two staff members pulled the cloth away, revealing a massive oil painting, a shattered dining table, broken crystal glasses, and mirrored shards reflecting pain, anger, and, at the center, a woman standing tall, paintbrush in hand, gaze forward. "Reclamation," I said. "Not just art, it's dignity, it's voice, it's me." Silence, then applause, rising like a wave. A Boston Review critic requested an interview. A New York collector whispered to Lindsay, "Name the price for the original." The front door opened. Mildred entered, back straight, eyes unyielding, with Brandon and Julie, her pregnancy now visible. "I thought this was public," Mildred said coldly. "Of course," I replied, stepping forward with a smile. "Everyone's welcome, even those who called art a waste of time." The room stirred, cameras turning. "You've used our name for a personal scandal," Mildred snapped. "You've disgraced our legacy." "I didn't disgrace your tradition," I said calmly. "I told the truth of what I lived through. This art is truth. This is my voice, and it's finally being heard." Mildred opened her mouth, but applause cut her off. A silver-haired man, the lead curator from the New England Museum of Fine Arts, stepped forward. "Mrs. Harrington, your son should be proud. We're considering this piece for next year's Women in the Voice exhibit." Mildred clutched her purse, silent. Julie lowered her head. Brandon stepped back. I turned to Lindsay and raised my glass. "What are we toasting?" she asked. "The words that broke me," I said. "Now the foundation of something new." The spotlight hit the painting, its glass shards catching light like fractured rainbows. This wasn't revenge. This was rebirth. Monday morning, I was in my second-floor office at the Haven, reviewing exhibit contracts from a Seattle gallery, when Lindsay called, her voice hushed. "Ella, turn on Channel 9. It's the Harringtons." The TV blared a red headline, "Harrington Capital under investigation for financial misconduct. Millions missing." The anchor reported Mildred and Brandon were suspected of misusing client funds, including leveraging the estate. I froze. If I hadn't filed the deed, the Haven could have been seized. My lawyer Gloria called to confirm, "Good thing you acted early, Ella. The property was nearly listed for asset seizure." That night, as I sealed a 19th century frame, my phone rang. Julie's voice was unrecognizable, broken. "Ella, I have nowhere to go. Brandon's cut me off, my mother's been subpoenaed, and I'm about to give birth. I have no home, no money, no one." Memories flooded back, her mocking smile, her laughter when Mildred called my art childish. "I'm not asking for much," Julie continued, voice cracking. "Just a guest room for the baby. I'll pay later. Please." I looked at my paint-smudged hands, once trembling, as I held divorce papers, now steady. "The guest house behind the garden is empty," I said. "I'll reset the code. You can stay until you find another way." Julie sobbed quietly. 3 hours later, her old silver car pulled up. She stepped out, thinner, clutching a faded canvas bag. No designer coats, no heels. Just a woman stripped raw. "Thank you," she said, eyes red. "I don't deserve it." I led her to the guest house, clean with fresh linens and soft lights. At the door, I paused. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for the child, who didn't choose this, and because I believe no one is defined forever by their mistakes." She nodded, tears falling. I walked away without another word. A spring morning brought sunlight filtering through the tree canopy, casting patterns on the Haven's brick walls, now a respected art restoration center. The gate buzzer rang. On the security camera, Mildred stood in a gray sweater, cradling a wrapped painting, her silver hair tied back. I took a deep breath and told Marcus, "Let her in, but only her." She entered the reception room, steps slow, pride softened. She unwrapped the painting, an old portrait of a young woman, colors faded, cracks like spiderwebs. "This is my mother," Mildred said quietly. "It's been in the attic for 30 years. I forgot it existed." I nodded. She continued, "Ella, I wronged you. I dismissed your dreams, pushed you out. When everything fell apart, I realized the only thing left was what was honest. I can restore this painting," I said, tracing a crack, "but it won't be the same. And that's good. Those cracks make it precious. The past doesn't need erasing, it needs acknowledgement, then rebuilding with grace." Mildred looked puzzled, then said, "I'm not here to ask. I'm here to learn. If you'll allow it, I'd like to work here. Admin tasks, cleaning, anything. To make something right, not to undo the past, but to live better." I pulled a file from my desk. "Start Monday. Someone will train you on digital records. This painting is scheduled for restoration next week, and I want you involved." She nodded, and in her eyes, once cold, I saw gratitude. In the weeks that followed, Mildred arrived daily. No luxury car, just a simple uniform, entering data, dusting frames, sometimes pausing before student works. Julie settled into the guest house, enrolling in a restoration course to understand what I dismissed. Her baby, Isaac, arrived on a quiet weekend with deep blue eyes and a gentle gaze. Julie called him unexpected joy. That evening, I stood with Professor Bennett in the main studio, sunset glowing through tall windows as we restored Mildred's mother's portrait. "You've changed this place," he said, brushing away old varnish, "and the people in it." I smiled, watching young apprentices, some from top schools, others dropouts, treat each crack like a memory to honor. "None of us are perfect," I said, adjusting a magnifying lens. "But in restoring art, we learn to restore life, not to erase it, but to reimagine it." Bennett nodded. "Sometimes what's broken becomes more beautiful than the original." In the garden, a breeze carried the scent of lavender. Julie pushed Isaac's stroller, Mildred jotted notes by the porch, and the baby slept, lips curled in a soft smile. I looked at the house, once a prison of judgment, now reborn. Not a victory, but a healing, a work of art redrawn through its imperfect lines. I wasn't just an artist. I was a keeper of memories, giving them a chance to live again, gently, honestly. What do you think of Ella's journey? Was her forgiveness a strength or a risk? Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories of triumph over adversity. Have you ever turned pain into purpose? Tell us your story. We're listening.